Hi everybody, thank you for watching Fast Track Tutorials. My name is Sam. Today we're going to be going over 5 quick tips as far as texturing goes that I used to texture this pot. We're going to be using Substance Painter. Tip 1 is going to be creating a metal base material. So I've gone ahead and hidden all the other layers, and the layers in red are the ones we want to focus on. Firstly, noise roughness. This is the kind of look we want to achieve. If we go into the roughness map, we can see these small dots, which are really gonna, as you can see here, give the material a nice pop that you really want to have in your materials. So this is really simple. All I did was add a Dirt 3 map. I tiled it up to about 14. These are rough measurements, by the way, so you can really just go by eye at this point, and whatever looks good to your eye, you should go with. The next thing I did was adjust the roughness, so I brought it down to 0.21. Again, it's just a per eye basis. You know, each person's opinion is different. But one thing you want to make sure you do is go to the roughness tab here, and it starts off at normal, and you want to change the blend mode to overlay. What this is going to do is just make it more visible throughout each layer you stack on top. The more layers you put on, the more you will notice whether or not you have overlay on. The next layer we're going to want to add to our base material is basically the same thing, but we want to just hit seed so it's not exactly hovering over your roughness, and we are going to change to color. So it is basically the color equivalent to what I just added to that noise. If we go to roughness, you can see this is what we did previously. And then base color, it is basically the same thing. So you put it on, instead of going into the roughness tab, go into overlay. It doesn't really matter what you have here. We just want base color overlay, same type of thing. And you adjust it just until you can kind of see it. You know, it's a case by case basis. If you're texturing this for close-ups, you know, maybe you want it to be a little bit more subtle, as opposed to if you're putting this into, say, Unreal Engine, and it's going to sit on a shelf and you're only going to be able to see it from, you know, 20 feet away. In that case, scaling this up is going to add that detail that you'll be able to see from a bit further away. The next layer we're going to add is the directional height. So this is what it looks like. This is a pretty simple layer. Basically, the way I achieved this was, if I'm going to hide all these right here, we start out with directional scratches here. So you can find this right in the search bar here. All these maps I've used, by the way, are just base Substance Painter maps, so they're easy to find. And you can really achieve a lot with just using Substance Painter default maps. So directional scratches, gonna throw this in here. As you can see, I've tweaked the parameters a little bit, so feel free to copy exactly, but this is another, you know, it's never, real world stuff is never, you know, one certain parameter. It's just kind of a variation, so don't feel like you have to copy exactly what I'm doing. Dirt scratchy grunge layer has been added here, and we've put it onto a subtraction method. So if we change it, this is kind of what it's looking like. I've tiled it up to about 4, and we want to change it back to subtract. Right here, subtract. So as you can see, all it's done is taken this map and subtracted this map from it. It just gives it that real world variation that we look for when we texture. And to add even more variation to this, all I did was duplicate twice this map and simply rotated it. So as you can see, it's quite exactly the same, but it has a slight slant to it as opposed to being perfectly straight like this one. It's been rotated, rotated, and it gives a nice look, a nice brushed metal look. Tip number 2 is adding heat distortion, heat discoloration. If I apply all these layers, you can see there's a nice gradient of colors that you can see kind of fading into one another, starting from, as you can see, yellow up to this emerald green teal type color. So to get this effect, I'm going to hide these layers and we're going to start on yellow base. So I'm going to hide these layers and we're going to start here with black and white spots. Again, this is a default map you can find in the search bar. So this texture map we're going to put from back to normal. As you can see, it's covering the whole thing. We don't want that. We just want it on the bottom. So in order to do that, I put it to a normal blend mode. You change it to, and then you simply paint in where you want to see the spots appear. So I've painted in these areas. If I go to the mask, these are the areas I've painted in, and I've added a blur on top of it, giving it a 1 intensity just to fade in those colors and make it seem pretty natural. I multiplied, as you can see, it's still called yellow base. Let's change it to red. Okay, and the only thing I did here, I kept the tiling exactly the same. That's important. And if I toggle between, you can see all I did was decrease the balance. So we're at 0.3 right now. This is where we were with 0.5 for the yellow, and we just bring it in a little bit, back to 0.3. And you're now able to see both. I did this exact same method when adding these two. Feel free to tweak your contrast as well. Tip number 3 is going to be adding grime. Right here in black edge color, I added a dirt generator, and all I did here was, if we go into the mask, this is what it ended up looking like. All I did here was add a grunge concrete tile, or texture rather, and set the blend mode here to subtract. So all it did was just add that little bit of variation that we look for. Very subtle, just to break it up. This is pretty difficult to see as I'm going to show you my parameters here. I've used color, roughness, and I have the metal activated. So 100% metal is this. And we want to just take it off a little bit, and I found it tends to look a bit more like dirt. Of course, as you take off dielectric, you just feel out this type of thing. So if this is your metal map, you start to see dirt here. We don't want it caked on there. We just want to see subtle signs of it, kind of like this. And this is even a little too much. I'm going to go back to, okay. Again, I started out with a dirt generator. I'm going to hide this one just to make looking at this a bit easier. I'm going to hide the first one. So to go into this, we have this type of caked on dirt look that we want to achieve. You get your dirt generator. These are the settings I used. It's pretty contrasted. It's just pretty heavy in general. You set it to multiply. Okay, you set it to multiply. and I used a moisture node, ironically enough, to make dirt. I've set it to 8. These are my parameters. And yeah, it's pretty simple. It fills in the multiply hides, and this fills it in. So what I did after that was I went around with my paintbrush, and I just, the specific brush I used was artistic heavy sponge. So you just go around, paint out the subtleties you want. You know, we're gonna add some layers here, so if it looks a bit sparse right now, don't worry. Yeah, and I added another subtract to give that directional look here. So the next map we're gonna add here, the same concept it's gonna follow. So this looks insane right now, as you can see. So we're gonna do the same type of thing. Hide this for the sake of looking at this. So we have it set to normal. Let's go ahead, bring it down to multiply. Galvanic large is the map I decided to go with because it has very distinct, sharp cutoffs. You know, it's a contrast texture. That's why I went for it. And these are my parameters for that. 9. So the next thing I did, I went around, painted it out, what I didn't want. Same type of brush I use, same process. You paint out what you don't want. It's pretty straightforward. One thing I did here that's worth noting, this is 100% subtraction. I still wanted a little bit of residual dirt there, so I went ahead and just kind of erased some of that subtraction work that I did with this brush. Brought it back, but in a very subtle way. It's not aggressive. And then from there, I added another fill layer set to subtract. It's the same concept as this noise here. Same noise. Just to add that extra cool look. To kind of go with the brushed look that I have going here. And then these here, these what do you call them? Paintbrushes. They're to take out what's on the inside. It's just a subtract, subtract. That's all. And then lastly, for this grime tip, the last thing we wanted to add is just another color variation type thing. This is very simple. As you can see, there's even tiling here. It can be kind of. So the last thing I wanted to add here was color variation. All I did here was a grunge concrete map. Didn't even tile it, kept it at 1. It depends on your resolution how you want it to look, but just to kind of go with, if I here I can quickly look at, it's just color, and then I set it to overlay. That is all I did. And now we can go ahead and bring out all these, and as you can see, they kind of go with each other. So as individual layers, you know, they do not look convincing at all, but when you go ahead and, you know, add them all together, they complement each other. They really do, and they make it look as one cohesive texture. We have some nice color variation in there, a little bit of roughness variation. It looks nice. The fourth tip is adding dents to our material. The first layer I'm going to add, I'm going to start with cells. Cells 1, yes, cells 1. As you can see, cells 1. Right here, it looks like this. If we go into this view mode, I'm going to take out all this. Okay. So, what I did here, it's currently inverted. To go back, this is kind of, it's at 0.68. We go boom, 0.68. Invert it, and it gives this obscure look that we kind of want to change right away. But the next thing I did was I added another fill layer. I set it to subtract, and this is just a simple black and white spots tiled up pretty high. Again, it doesn't really matter what your tiling is, as long as you're happy with the result. These are my parameters. I set it to subtract, and I cut the subtract in half basically. I still wanted a little bit of the dent to be there, but I didn't. I wanted to create some nice variation within the dent itself. So as you can see, this still isn't really what a realistic dent would look like on a pot, so we go ahead and add our blur to kind of finish it off. And yeah, as you can see, you get kind of like a very subtle but nice dent generator that you can play with. So we're gonna add more of these layers to dents 2. So what we did here was add clouds 2. These are my parameters, tiling. And to go back on our, I didn't show you the previous parameters for dent 1, but they're basically the same. Okay, our height is a little bit different, but these dents we want to be more severe. So clouds 2, from there we duplicate it and we set it to subtract. So it thins it out a bit, it thins it out, goes from this to this, and we have offset this, which is what makes this worth. Offset and tiling has changed. Okay. Now we're going to go add our blur and then our paintbrush. Yeah, like right, you can see them. This is a very broad breakup, just so we can properly see through here. So it doesn't look like much in the mask, but our height is very severe, so you're able to see it pretty clearly. Alright, not that severe. So we basically, it's just a duplication of the same process. My parameters for each one here, pretty much the same. And then you add a blur. So I 0.275 is my intensity for the blur. And then this is just another subtract for the bottom that we do not want. Okay. So this is kind of what you get. Just a nice, you get that nice variation. The fifth tip is going to be adding this kind of dried water drip look to your pot. The first thing we want to do, luckily Painter has basically an exact texture that you would need to use for this. It's called Leak Small. It does exactly what it has. It serves one purpose, is to make this detail. So we're going to add this in. These are my parameters. We're going to add a fill layer here, set it to subtract a simple black and white spots. My parameters are here. And again, this is just to break up some repeating factors and to make it look a bit more unique. And then what I do here is paint out whatever details I do not like. So if I notice something is not maybe where I want it to be, as opposed to trying to tile this and you just create sometimes more work than you want, you can just kind of finish it off via a subtract paintbrush and just go around, clean up the areas you don't want. And it looks like I've made 2, but you really only need 1. So that's detail 5. Another thing you want to notice is these are my material parameters. So I've set the base color. My roughness is pretty high. And my metallic is more towards the dirt value. It's gone away from pure metal. So as you can see, the base color here drips. You can see it very lightly. It's as if dirt had been attracted, had gotten stuck in uh, a, a, a line of water and it's dried. That's basically the concept I was looking to achieve. So it's rougher than its base material of the pot. And yeah, metallic. It's more towards this more is more towards the dirt side. It's less pure white. It's more on the black side. Thanks again for watching Fast Track Tutorials. These were 5 tips on improving your texturing in Substance Painter. Thank you.